Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for another Secret Sunday session today. Today, I'm joined by Josh Jones, and today we'll be talking to Josh about his story and also what he's doing with his project, Just Be Nice. We're going to talk a lot about, as I said, Josh's story. So to kick us off straight away, Josh, do you want to explain to us who you are and what it is that you are doing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I don't know if everyone knows that the big secret about Secret Sunday is that it's not Sunday right now, but we won't spoil it too much. I won't spoil it too much.
No. The secret's out now.
The secret's out. Secret's out. It's good to be prepared. I am. Look, my name is Josh, and I'm a person that's always been about trying to help people and make sure people get good help, and then help people in that process. So I guess the motto that I sort of sometimes use is to tell people that I'm trying to create extraordinary positive change in the world by helping people make ordinary positive change, taking what people are good at and turning it into great systems of help for people in need. And so I run the Just Be Nice project, and that's what we do. We try and help people until they're housed, employed, and have good mental health outcomes, and work in communities to remove barriers to housing, employment, and good mental health outcomes. And that keeps me busy pretty much every day.
That's absolutely incredible. Congratulations on the work that you're doing. It's definitely needed in today's world. But I want to look at why you actually started the Just Be Nice project.
Yeah, look, there's probably a few things that go into that. The question that has dominated my brain forever, as long as I can remember, there was no like epiphanous moment where I went, oh, this is the thing I have to do. It's been something that I've thought about deeply for my whole life. But the question is, why don't people get the help that they need when they need it, for as long as they need it, regardless of how they come to need help? And we operate in a world and in a system where sometimes you get some help, sometimes you get enough help. A lot of the times people don't. A lot of help is predicated on where you live and what you look like and how you came to need it in the first place. And so I've always thought that the best way to be able to do help, and I still think that, the best thing you can do is to be really good at something that's going to improve your capacity for impact. And so along the way in my life, I've always tried to do things well and solve this kind of problem, work out what are the structural things, what are the things that people think that get in the way, what are the challenges and obstacles we have to overcome to improve help for people in need. And once I felt like I had a framework that worked to that end and didn't just work in one context, didn't just work in one city or in one country, but is something that is dynamic and flexible enough to work in Australia, in Chile, and in the Philippines, in the UK, in Azerbaijan, it doesn't matter. Then I started the Just Be Nice project, which is about 9 years ago, doing that, bringing people into that process and then working to build the infrastructure and build the resources that can help people get the help that they need.
And you talk a lot about barriers. Now, there are barriers in terms of getting help, especially in our country, in Australia. How did you find in your project and in your work that you can break down those barriers? Is it still a challenge today? Because a lot of these barriers, come from centuries and are stereotypes and have been embedded in a lot of us. How do you break down those barriers today?
It's a great question, because for as many different problems that people can have and combinations of problems that people can have, which is, I suppose, needless to say, it's an infinite number of challenges. There's an infinite number of ways that people come to find themselves in need, and an infinite number of intensities and levels of difficulty and all of those things. So that means that there's probably, conversely, an infinite number of barriers in small and large ways that prevent people from being able to get good help. Ironically, one of the major ones is that we just actually need a consensus that everyone deserves help, and that environments around people can either be conducive to help or not. And that might sound self-evident to some people and probably feeds into some frustrations that people have when they're trying to do help, because often people come to recognize a need from either having it themselves or having seen someone that they know fall into a gap or see a gap in a service or in a help or in an opportunity. And so they go, well, is this not obvious to everyone? But the truth is, we actually don't fundamentally agree culturally that everyone deserves help. We don't believe in that, and we don't believe that we don't have consensus in an outcome that everyone should get to, where we think, righto, we need to, without question, ensure that everyone gets this basic level of amenity and opportunity and support. And without that, it's very difficult to try and, I suppose, adjust or change or attack or move or change small individual barriers along the way without this kind of agreement that everyone deserves help. And so, there are individual, cause, community-specific barriers, and obviously we approach all of them trying to meet people where they are. But also, it's for us, we've got this idea that everyone deserves to have this set of outcomes. And the largest challenge is getting people to agree that, oh yeah, everyone does, regardless of how they come to need help. So I think the big ticket item is getting consensus there. And then from there, we can set about the business of working out the nuance of making sure everyone gets there from where they are.
And do you think these barriers need to be broken down at a government level or, as you said, at an individual level?
Both. And my personal philosophy and the way that we operate is both. Governments don't change on their own. They can't drive a policy that people don't already believe in. And it's why sometimes you end up with policies that are less than ideal. And that's from both governments or both sides of government. We've got sort of this two-party system here. So, both kinds of government leave some things to be desired, and I would say some more than others, but they are driven by what people want and what people understand as being important. So we've got a duty of care to not just help people, but help people understand what's possible and how that can be possible, and then drive that change to then work its way up into business, into communities, into education, and into government, so that we get policy that reflects the new beliefs or the new goals of everyone. But that's a really long-term project, and people, I find that in the space of trying to make change, people are incredibly short-term focused. They get very frustrated very quickly, and they confuse intensity with efficacy. Screaming and yelling and really caring about something and shouting into the void doesn't necessarily bring people over to understanding where you're at or the things you want them to understand. And you've got to take as much time to help people understand as you've got to allow for people who need help as well. And so it's a long-term project and something that we try and do by doing, engaging, discussing, bringing together, showing, repeat for probably 20 or 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And just starting that conversation, I think, is so necessary in a space where we can actually do that now. But looking at social media, there are positive and negative effects, of course, of the platform. Do you think that social media has positively affected breaking down these barriers, or it's just a lot of noise at the moment?
I think largely noise. I think overarchingly, it's probably had I think it's had a net negative effect on the world, I would say. I don't think it's a net positive. I don't think people are more connected. I think they're more disconnected. I think they're more available. But I also think, the things that work on social media and the mechanisms that it triggers in everyone's brains are largely around intensity and attention and those sorts of responses. And none of those have anything to do with genuine community or bringing people together or a genuine understanding. It doesn't facilitate good, long, in-depth engagements with people. It doesn't help people discern what's true all that well. So I think largely it's a negative on the world. And in some ways, it does help you get information across. But anything that you can do quickly the opposite of what you're trying to do can do quickly too. So for every like, this is really important, there is an opposite, this is not important, or this is a lie, can also just get that attention just as quickly. So would I give that up? Absolutely. I would trade it in for people to pay more attention to the people around them and to engage in a more human way. I think I would trade it in a heartbeat if that was on the table, for sure.
Do you find as well with the rise of social media that it is preventing people from reaching out and getting help? Because we are hearing a lot of people that are talking about their issues now publicly on social media. Do you feel that that's then a barrier for people not to reach out?
I think there's a couple of things that go into the process of asking for help and the way that we use social media and technology in general, and have used it. The one example I like to give people is, if you don't spend time talking to people in real life, if you don't have those reps, when I was at school, a lot of the conversation about talking to people, they would start off and they'd say, 80% of your communication is non-verbal. It's about being near people. It's about it's about tone, and it's about their posture, and it's about what they're doing. And conversations in person are very different, and they're different again if you don't have your phones anywhere near you too. So, that was how I went through school and everything like that. And so we got. I really straddled the phone thing. I did at uni. Google was starting to become a thing. I wrote on about the impacts of Google for my undergraduate degree, and phones were just coming in and stuff. And so if you came to me at 15 years old, most of my, if you want to call them reps, like in the gym, like most of my reps of conversation were in person. Like the overwhelming majority of the reps of conversation were in person, face to face with people, some on the phone, and then text messages and stuff started to come in, and we had the Nokia 3310s, no pictures, just texts, 20 cents a text. So we weren't just sending them flat out. It wasn't like WhatsApp groups and stuff like that. And because of that, we had a very different developmental experience to people who now at 15 or 16, instead of it being 95% reps in person and 5% through phones and home phones, it's almost the other way around for a lot of people. And I work in schools, and I talk to kids and I go, when was the last time you just had one-on-one conversation, no phones? And for so many kids, they can't remember it. They don't have a time when they did that. So if you don't get that experience around people where you have to take the time to understand what's going on with them, where you're paying attention to them in real time, it makes your experience poorer. You can't interrogate your own feelings very well. And instead, we're trying to add in all this extra stuff, this mindfulness training, and just think about yourself all day and what do you feel and all this kind of thing. And I think that that's the wrong way to go about it, because people are already overly conscious about themselves anyway, because they're making decisions about what they project all the time. And people go, oh, how does paying attention to other people help you know yourself better? Really, like, you still need to focus on yourself. And the example I always give is, imagine if we were the only two people on the Gold Coast, and we bumped into each other, and there's no one else. We haven't seen anyone forever. You've never seen another person, and you've been living a good life. You've got food and stuff, and you're all good. And we meet, and we're just working stuff out. So we work out, oh, this kind of feels good, and this kind of feels good, and then we do the things that feel good when two people bump into each other, and then I wander off, because that's what happens. We just go our own separate ways. But you get pregnant. But you've never seen a pregnant person before. Mm-hmm. You've never seen a pregnant person. You've never spoken to anyone about what that is. You don't know. You're going to be looking at yourself going, what on earth is happening to me? And then what happens when you have the baby? You're going to be like, what? What is happening? Like, what? There's a thing, it just came out of me. And it is going to be so wildly out of context for you. That's not the case if you spend lots of time with people and families and in big groups, and this person's just had a baby, and you go, okay. And at different ages, your understanding about that matures, and how it happens changes, and all this kind of stuff. And so when it happens to you, the more pregnant people you've seen, the more births you've seen, the more mums you've been around, the more tools you have to understand your own experience.
Mm.
But if I just put you in a box like that time you were pregnant, said, oh, just write everything that you think is happening and just broadcast it to the world, you could be so wildly wrong for so long and still be 100% authentic to what you think. And still just be like, I think I ate something, or I feel like I need to do, a big poo, and people will be going like, that's so wrong. And it's only wrong because all we've done is give you tools to focus on yourself. And that's one of the sort of negative side effects of encouraging everybody to just have this performative focus on yourself, tell everyone what's going on with yourself attitude, instead of build strong networks of real human relationships around real human beings who are really around you and really understand what's going on, and learning from everyone's experience all at once. Because it gives you more tools to understand, like, oh, I'm not the first person to be sad about a breakup. I'm not the first person to have a fight with my parents. I'm not the first person to fall over, cut my knee, and it bleed and freak me out. I'm not the first person to go through rehab for this injury, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're 100% of the people that you know that have been through a thing, because no one's ever talked to you about it or you've not observed it in anyone, then it becomes a much bigger thing than if you're 1% of the people that you know that have done it, because 99 other people that have been through it. And that takes the intensity out of it in some ways, through solidarity, through experience, through getting to see other people go through it. And so, are people poorer at reaching out for help? I don't know. Are people poorer at understanding what's going on with other people? Absolutely. No question in my mind that people are getting worse at it, because we're not encouraging people to get offline and look after the people around them. We're encouraging people to do things like, oh, put it online. Well, that's the very last thing you should do when you're better, not in the middle of it. You shouldn't be relying on reactions from people online to inform whether or not you're going to be okay and get through something. Hopefully, and I hope for everyone, that they have a supportive, caring and attentive enough network that they can get through these things offline, and sure, reflect on them later. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. But the mechanism is not to go through it in real time on TikTok.
And I believe with these platforms as well, it's a very competitive environment. And what I'm seeing at the moment as well amongst young people is people are in the midst of recovery, no matter whatever they're going through, and they're sharing their signs and their symptoms and what they did in a day. And other people are then feeling not sick enough because their symptoms don't relate to the person that is sharing that online. And I feel that is almost another barrier in itself, because people then don't want to reach out for help or share what they are going through because they don't compare to a person that ideally looks sicker or is having worse symptoms.
Yeah. And I mean, the concept of sharing too is different. I mean, putting stuff online is not sharing. It's just putting stuff online. It's not the same as taking the time to chat to your friends about what's going on and chat to your family and do those things. Something that the internet has really distorted, and something I have to clarify constantly with places and people, is that it's not easier to help 1 million people than it is to help one. Just because you can get lots of views doesn't mean you've helped 1 million people at all. Help people next to you. Don't look past the people that are around you every day in aid of like, oh, but if I do this thing, I just hope to inspire or do that. Easy on that, more on the people around you. Don't look past the people near you. Make sure everyone around you is okay and that you're doing what you can there. And then it goes, you help 1, 2, 10, 100, 1,000. And that journey to 1,000 can take decades. Not, I'll ignore the people around me, lock myself in a room and broadcast to the world, and that will help 1 million people. It doesn't work like that. In no field, in no kind of impact does it work like that. So start close to home and do that. Be the example you want to see. Support the people nearby. Take the time to do those things and build those good relationships. And then after that, it might be worth talking about it. But this going through it on the internet in real time definitely harms more people than it helps, including the people who are doing the broadcasting. Because one side effect is that, and this is something I see in a little bit of this kind of online activism sort of space, is someone shares something very personal and very emotional. And they get this huge uptick in engagement. People go, oh my God, it was so brave. It was so amazing. Wow. And so let's say it's about my recovery from drinking too much tea, which I just do all day because one of my tasks is just walk to the kettle and turn it on just to not be sitting at my desk all day, you know?
Yeah.
So I've said this big story and I'm like, oh God, and I've battled with this tea and it's really hard. And everyone goes, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And then I think, oh, wow, like that resonated with a lot of people. I'm having this great impact because I've got lots of likes. And I say something about it again a little bit later on. I say, oh, you know, the tea thing and I'm working on it kind of a little bit less, but, you know, okay. And then a couple of weeks later, as is the nature of everyone's attention spans and the internet, I'm still talking about tea, but people don't care as much anymore. And I've said that I just care deeply about it, but actually I'm running out of steam because I got 1,000 views on the first one and 800 on the second. Now it's at 400, 200. Now it's 100. People aren't really caring because they're a bit like, yeah, we get it. You drink too much tea. Like we've got the gist. We've moved on.
And they've done that. Yeah.
That's right. So then what I see happening is then I get back on in a few weeks and I go, guys, I'm really tired of doing the emotional labor of teaching you guys about tea. It's really hard and no one seems to care. And you know, I'm exhausted. And it's like, yeah, of course you are, because you like that's change takes that long. Engagement takes that long. Like you can use some of these mechanisms to keep in the zeitgeist to stay on top of an algorithm. Outrage is good. Really emotional stuff is good. I mean, funny stuff is good too. But like, that's not change making. That change making is a long-term process that usually involves meeting people where they are. And then people get confused because they say, well, I've done all this and I've been vulnerable and I've put it out there and now no one cares. You can build it back up again. It just takes a really, really long time. And it's on you to work out different ways to communicate and really know what you're talking about. So I think that has also skewed the way that people look at activism and look at making change and look at talking about issues, because rather than engage with people who have spent a long time really knowing what they're talking about, really taking the time to go through things, really exploring ideas and challenges, to people who can get a good emotional response. And instead we get a different issue every day, piquing our interest or piquing the algorithm. And I don't think that benefits anyone, because now everyone's trying to have the peak, and that just means cause battling. So then we're just battling causes all the time. And that's a challenge.
I just think that's so sad that we live in a society that is, one, needing validation externally, but two, as well, we're living in a society where the poor me syndrome almost is what we need in order to feel good, that I need to feel worse so that I can get likes and I can get comments and I can get validated, where we're living almost always then in this emotional tie of feeling bad about ourselves and getting worse rather than getting better and wanting to feel good about ourselves.
Absolutely. You shouldn't derive, your self-worth from any of this stuff online. I don't think. There are some really wonderful tools and some really wonderful things can come from it. But, the best things are, dinner with your friends and going for a walk and having time with, building deep relationships with people that care. That's just true of humans. Like that's just, it's in us to want that and to respond to that positively and to be able to build an identity that is robust and strong, but still dynamic and flexible and amenable to the good days and the bad days along the way, in ways that the internet is just not built for that. The internet is built for attention. All social media is built for attention, and it's built for intensity. And that's very, very different. It's very different. And if that's what you're seeking, then I don't think you get good outcomes from that. Brene Brown writes a really great, interesting thing. I think it's in like one of the books about delivering good TED Talks, written by the guy who started TED Talks. And she says, if what you talk about, if you go and tell a story or you're talking about something, if the audience's reaction is in any way part of how you want to deal with what you're going through, you are talking about it prematurely. You need to be so far past that before you start telling the public about it. And I don't think many people are. I think people have a thing and they go, oh, what I've got to do is jump online in a hurry and do this thing. And that's, again, that's in my mind, the wrong way to do it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Social media and I guess the internet shouldn't be your first point to making a difference in this world. Do you find as well that people's perspectives on life have changed and been altered? I think post COVID as well, I'm finding at least that a lot of people are feeling lost and out of control. And with social media, and I guess the expectation to always be happy and you've got to live this glamorous life, do you find that people are struggling more than ever to deal with the bad days because they always should be on this high?
I think it depends on your context, in that there are, for me, like obviously there's, we've got life, we've got real life when we're in the real world with real people. We've got, the things that happen online. But in a broader sense, we've got these existential threats to what happens to us every day. So, I mean, climate change is obviously a big one, but economic pressures globally is another one. There are people all over the world that are living in abject poverty and war zones and areas where, the impacts of climate change are very visible. And I mean, there's places in Australia where we've seen that sort of play out over the last couple of years as well. And so I think the challenge is when we don't agree that everyone deserves help, needing help becomes terrifying. And if you don't ever want to need help, then you need to start scrambling to secure your future in some way. So, I mean, yeah, it's nice to be economically, I've got to have a house, but I need 2, 3 houses. Like if something goes wrong, or, I want everyone to be educated, but my kids need the best education. I'm going to pay 20 times as much to make sure my kids get the best education, best opportunities. And we're going to start hoarding these things. We're going to start like an uneven distribution of this stuff because we're going to shore ourselves up. And the irony being that the more inequality you have, the greater the risk appears, which makes people want to increase the amount of inequality, because now the drop is even further, like being one of these people or one of these families, one of these communities living in one of these countries that's not as privileged as we are. And I think we are starting now to feel very acutely the gaps between people on one side and the other, where this inequality gap is widening, where people are starting to go, I don't think I'm going to be able to do these things that my parents were able to do. I don't think I'm going to be able to do these things that I was told I was going to be able to do my whole life. Buy a house, do this thing, go to uni, learn some stuff. Growing up, you get told work hard, learn some things, do some stuff. You're gonna, and you get opportunities. You might get some respect, and then we just watch people just kick experts in the teeth for 2 years, and we watch properties go up, or people weren't eating, and we watch all these things go on, and some people getting paid heaps, and some people can't work. And do we help these people who can't work? No, absolutely not. Like, who's going to pay for that? And I think those things feed into an environment of uncertainty and inequality that make not only people's moods harder to manage when they feel bad, but actually in a very material sense, you can be like really left behind very quickly because of some of these structural things. And so for some people that are in genuine need, in genuine material need, yeah, a couple of bad weeks means they will languish. They will be struggling to catch up, to get on top of that for years. It can be years for some of these people. And that, of course, is a huge challenge to overcome. And getting the understanding around it is a huge challenge to overcome. But then getting the structures in place to support people and getting the buy-in to people saying we're all better together if we're all better together is another massive challenge that I certainly see as a pressing one at the moment.
How do people overcome this individually, knowing that each day, whether they're stuck in this cycle or they're waking up and they're seeing all this content, and unfortunately you can't just shut off from the world, whether it's the news, whether it's social media or it's work conversations, you're constantly in this negative realm. How do people get on top of their life, if you want to say it, and really learn to appreciate life and appreciate what they've got instead of looking at what if and what I can't have?
People are really good at recognizing opportunities they didn't have and really bad at recognizing opportunities that they have had. that's just true of people, particularly now. We don't teach it very well. We don't teach people to pay attention to the things around them. And it's a bit of a side effect of this very individualistic cultural moment that we're having, where people want to take full responsibility for any success they may have had, for instance. And then the very successful people, they take full personal responsibility for their success. And then when they see someone who is in need, or in a place where they need a bit of help, or they're not quite where they want to be, their answer or their advice is individual in nature. They say, you need to do this thing. I am focused on the things around people that allow them to do what they do. And what are the environments that are conducive to success and to connection and opportunity? Because no one did everything on their own. There's no such thing as a self-made person. No one, it doesn't exist. Everyone's a beneficiary of the environment that they're in some way. And of course, sometimes people say, well, all this terrible stuff happened to me. And then you go, yeah, but enough not terrible stuff and enough support was around you to be able to get through that to this place where you are now, where you're sort of beyond that. And imagine if you didn't have that, you might be stuck back where you were. So at an individual level, I sort of rail against telling everyone what they need to do individually, because I think for some people, it's what we need to do around them to make sure that they have opportunities to live into, not just like expectations to live up to. And that we pay attention to all the wonderful ways that we were assisted in our lives, so that we can advocate for that assistance for people and those supports for people. So one exercise I invite people to do, and I certainly invite people who are listening to do, is to try and tell the story of your life without taking any credit for anything that happened. Like, assign it all to luck, assign it all to the people and the places and the things around you. And it's incredibly difficult when you've never paid attention to all the hand ups that you got along the way. It's very, very difficult. People really struggle with it. The older you are, I think the harder it is, because you can't look back on things you didn't pay attention to in the time and really notice them. But for me, for instance, a short snippet of my life, I played Australian rules football. And so growing up, I was a bigger kid. Nothing to do with me. Luck of the draw, bigger kid. Yeah. Great. It's good for junior football to be bigger. Like, it's a good thing. If you grow a bit big early, you enjoy it more, you do well. I played well. Great. There was a football club that was like 2 blocks from my house. Nothing to do with me. Absolute luck of the draw. This football club's 2 blocks from my house. I have a younger brother and a sister. And so mum, and a single mum. So she couldn't drive all of us everywhere. But because I'm bigger, nothing to do with me. Because this footy club's nearby, nothing to do with me. I could go and play footy. I could walk there. I could get there on my own. People drove me to footy games just because they're lovely people at the footy club. Thanks very much. Nothing to do with me. And I played footy, and I played with enough good people to play well, got some attention, things went well, nothing to do with me, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, the great relationships and the great opportunities I had from playing football turned into a whole bunch of really positive things in my life. Hundreds of positive things, lots of great friends, work, all kinds of stuff. Whole trajectory of my life tied to this series of things I had nothing to do with. Now, we can take it for granted that I trained hard and did all that stuff, and that's why I got to be good at footy. But that's not the story I care to tell, because whatever, sure. I mean, cool, good on you, bro. But how does that help anyone who needs help? And now that football club isn't there anymore. So someone grows up in the house I grew up in, all things the same, no footy club. Who knows where they end up? Who knows what rat bag stuff I get up to instead? Take that youthful, aggressive energy and turn it into, running around with some of my friends who weren't doing the greatest things all the time, and all of a sudden, 3 or 4 different decisions later, environmental decisions later, I'm in a completely different place with a completely different set of expectations and challenges. I'd love to take credit for it all, but it'd be stupid to. It's the coaches, it's the location, it's the luck of the draw genetically that I was big enough, it's being the oldest, it's all of these things. And because of that, when I'm advocating for how do we, give people these chances, I'm saying we need a footy club and a dancing studio and we need somewhere for them to paint, and we need somewhere for them to play, and we need all of these things so people can find the thing that leads to all of these opportunities and growth and ways to navigate challenges going forward. Instead of just walking into all these areas, these derelict places and these underserviced areas and saying, well, you just need to try harder, train harder, care more, do more. And there's a poor little 10-year-old kid going, are you fucking serious? Like, how am I supposed to, one, take that lesson on, and two, even do all this stuff? Stop pretending it was all you that did it all. It wasn't. There was so much around you that had nothing to do with you. So for me, it's about how do we look around and encourage people to realize that there is all this wonderful opportunity around us that we did nothing to earn. And there is also a bunch of challenges around us that we did nothing to deserve. And so let's reduce the number of challenges. Let's improve the number of opportunities. Let's make it more equal and create environments where people can go and be great. And I think then we'll be able to bring people along a lot better than how do I tell this person, this 10-year-old kid, that if he wants to play football and do all these wonderful things, he has to try harder.
I love that. That is absolutely amazing. I think that would be a challenge for a lot of people to withdraw themselves from the situation. But yeah, go out and try that. I'm going to try that after this. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there any lasting comments or messages that you would like to share with viewers, something that maybe you've learned along the way?
Yeah, look, it's much the same thing. It's about, I think sometimes it sounds trite to help the people nearest to you, to help the people you know the most. And because it's like, oh, that's just a bit fluffy. And in the age of big engagement and big numbers and people wanting to say, I helped 1,000 people or raise $1,000, it's easy to get lost. Most of our lives is lived in a pretty mundane middle ground bit. It's not crazy intense. It's not crazy exciting. And if you help the people near you, a couple of wonderful things happens. One, you actually have the time and the trust and the connection to actually help them. Two, you learn how difficult it is to help people. You learn how long it takes. It can take years to get people from a bad situation to a good one. And if you're committed to helping them to an outcome instead of helping them for a set amount of time in your brain or for a set amount of attention, then you learn actually, this is complicated and it takes time. And so when I'm advocating for help for others, I'm going to advocate for extra time and extra sophistication in that help and all the extra resources they need, which makes my job very much easier at JVN, because I'm like, yeah, that's right. It takes time. There's all this stuff. Let's do it. But it also takes you away from what you need to tell everyone and to what you're doing. And if you said to me, oh, no one I know needs help, then I would say, then you don't know enough about helping people and you don't know enough about the people around you. And so you really shouldn't start trying to help people on the internet because you don't know it's clear that you don't know. So if you start there and work your way out, these things take time. There's no pressure to go and do a million things at once. Start close to home, build those networks, build those communities around you and make sure that you sort of lead the way there. And if we just had more people doing that, it would be a lot easier to drive change. People would understand more deeply the needs of others, be able to place their own needs in a context that's probably more useful and less intense for them and more helpful. And we would stop problems from getting really, really bad before we paid attention to them in a lot of cases. So it sounds trite. It sounds like a silly, old person thing to say, oh, just help the people near you. But there's a number of things that really help if you do that. And then, help one, help two, help 10. There's no rush to get to 10. Help one, and you've done a wonderful thing. And you should be happy with that. And you shouldn't need to have to tell anyone. And you shouldn't need to broadcast it. And you should be happy that you're able to be a part of it. Do more of that, and I think the world will start to move towards being a much better place.
That's amazing. Yeah, it starts with one person. It doesn't need to be a mass job. It's just those individual lives that you can help and spread that kindness. So thank you so much for jumping on here today and sharing your story and just starting that conversation with me about social media and being nice and really trying to improve the individual self. It's been an amazing conversation. Where can people find you?
Well, on social media, you can follow. Ironically,
we said positives and negatives.
That's right. Yeah, there's obviously I'm fine. You can follow me on there, but no, my name on everything is Josh Reid Jones, Reid, Josh Reid Jones. I use my middle name because Josh Jones is painfully common, and my middle name is my mum's maiden name, and it's a nice little shout out to my mum. So yeah, Josh Reid Jones on all the things. Find me on Instagram and LinkedIn, and JBN Project, JBN for Just Be Nice. So JBN Project, one word, jbnproject.com. You can also hit us up there, and Just Be Nice Project on all the things as well. So any one of those will sort of send you towards me. And if you've got any questions or anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today, and just, as I said, starting that conversation, and congratulations on all the work that you're doing, because it is phenomenal. Whether you're changing heaps of people's lives or one person's lives, you've definitely got a passion there, and it's amazing just to hear it and be able to share that today. So thank you.
Thank you. It's very kind. It's my pleasure.
No worries. Well, thank you as well to everyone else out there for joining us today, and we'll catch you again in a month's time.